Anti-vaxxers, would you like some prison time with that? As I sit here and take in all of the news from every direction, all I see is deceivers, liars, corporate media, cover-ups, agenda, all pushing the same propaganda. It's time for a game changer, a visionary, an innovative person who changes the way that people think of the situations. It's time for Game Changer TV, telling it like it is. Get in the game. Y'all are going to have to get a flow chart out for this. Thanks for tuning into Game Changer TV. I'm your host, Terri Lynn, and this is the channel where every day we're telling it like it is. Today is May 7th, 2025. And again, one of those videos that was not even on my to-do list, but I saw an article from yesterday that I had to expose this. Y'all, information is moving so fast now. So many global agendas are coming from every direction. It's hard to keep up with. But let's get into this. Would you like some prison time with that? This article is from yesterday, May 6th, from Eco Business. Gates Foundation sets up Singapore office, fronts US $100 million in philanthropic effort for regional health initiatives. It will be the foundation's first office in Southeast Asia. Speaking at the annual Ecosperity, bringing together the economy and biology and people together. At a conference that convened by Singapore, state investigator Timisak, the American billionaire philanthropist, also said the Trump-led pushback on the climate will subside. Do y'all hear this? The United States Gates Foundation, one of the world's largest private philanthropic organizations, will be establishing a physical presence in Singapore as it opens a new office to deepen partnerships in global health and development in Southeast Asia. How is he going to know that Trump's pushback will subside? So yesterday, this article, Bill Gates is in Singapore establishing an office on global health. This was May 5th, Bill Gates to open Gates Foundation office in Singapore. Announced by Bill Gates at the Philanthropy Asia Summit 2025, the Gates Foundation's new Singapore office marks a strategic shift towards deeper regional engagement, positioning the city-state as a hub for innovation in health, climate, and development across Southeast Asia. In a moment that marked the turning point for global philanthropy, Bill Gates announced that the Gates Foundation, where he serves as chair and founder, will open a new office in Singapore, its first in Southeast Asia. Now, are y'all ready to see what Singapore just did after this meeting with Bill Gates opening his office in Singapore? The only place I found this was with Slay News, and it's considered extreme right, but I was able to confirm it. But they are the only person reporting this that I have found today. Maybe it'll be posted tomorrow. This is from today. Singapore citizens face jail for refusing vaccines after government changes laws to criminalize anti-vaxxers. And y'all, who did they just meet with? May 5th, Bill Gates meets in Singapore, establishes a office in Singapore, and 2 days later, Singapore citizens face jail for refusing vaccines after government changes laws to criminalize anti-vaxxers. Can you believe this? Are y'all ready? Let's read some in this article. The Singapore government has just updated its laws to make it a crime to refuse mandatory vaccines, punishable with prison time. I'm not going to rush past this. The Singapore government has just updated its laws a day or two after they met with Bill Gates to make it a crime to refuse mandatory vaccines, punishable with prison time. Y'all keep in mind that Bill Gates met with Donald Trump for 3 hours in January, and he said that he was impressed with Trump's eagerness to assist him with what he's wanting to do. Is that where he's speaking with authority that Trump's opposition is going to subside? The Singapore government has just updated its laws. Now, y'all write down Singapore updated its laws, because what's going to happen when our laws get updated? Wait till y'all see this. Singapore government has just updated its laws to make it a crime to refuse mandatory vaccines, punishable with prison time. The updates to the nation's laws open the door to criminal prosecution for members of the public who refuse to submit to government-mandated injections. Are y'all ready to stand up to this? If it means don't take it and go to jail, or take it and do who know what to your body, which choices are coming. Interestingly, the changes have emerged while vaccine advocate Bill Gates has been visiting Singapore to meet with the nation's leadership. This week, Bill Gates wrapped up his 2-day visit in Singapore. The trip included meetings with Singapore leaders and various speaking engagements. On May 5th, Bill Gates announced at the Philanthropy Asia Summit 2025 that the Gates Foundation will open an office in Singapore. The organization's establishment of presence in Singapore was supported by the Singapore Economic Development Board. On the same day, Bill Gates also met with Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, as well as senior ministers Lee Hsien Loong and Tia Chi Hien. Meanwhile, the new amendments to sections 47, 65, and 67 of Singapore's 1976 Infectious Disease Act now mean that people who refuse to get vaccinated when directed to by the government would be considered criminals and face prosecution. Didn't we hear all this argument during the Lyras? Okay, let's click on this. So this is from Singapore's government, the Singapore Government Agency website. Infectious Disease Act 1976, updated May 8th. So Singapore is 12 hours ahead of New York. Okay, so it's already May 8th there. Let's go see this from the Singapore government. Power to order certain persons to undergo vaccination or other prophylaxis. In an outbreak or a suspected outbreak of any infectious disease in any area in Singapore that Bill Gates now has an office in, the Director General of Health may, by order, direct any person or class of persons not protected or vaccinated against the disease to undergo vaccination or other prophylaxis within the period specified in the order. In addition to the power conferred by the subsection 1, where it appears to the Director General of Health that an outbreak of infectious disease in any area in Singapore is imminent, and it is necessary or expedient to do so for the securing of public safety. The Director General of Health may, by order, direct any person or class of persons not protected or vaccinated against the infectious disease to undergo vaccination or other prophylaxis within the period specified in the order. Any order made under subsection 1 or 2 may specify the person by whom the manner in which the vaccinated or other prophylaxis is to be carried out. Where any order is made under subsections 1 or 2, the Director General of Health must cause notice of the effect of the order to be given in such a manner as the Director General of Health thinks necessary for bringing it to notice of all persons who, in the opinion of the Director General of Health, ought to have notice of it. Any person guilty of an offense under this act for which no penalty is expressed provided shall, in the case of the first offense, be liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding $10,000 or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months, or to both. And in the case of the second or subsequent offense, be liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding $20,000 or to be imprisonment for a term not exceeding 12 months or both. My question is, why isn't it this mainstream news? In addition, Section 67 of the IDA exempts the Singapore authorities from any liability with the text reading, "No liability shall lie personally against the Director General of Health, the Director General of Public Health, the Director General, Food Administration, or any health officer, adjunct health officer, port health officer, or police officer who, acting in good faith and with reasonable care, does or admits to do anything in the execution or purported execution of this act." As such, members of the public and their families would not be able to sue the government if people are injured or killed by their forced vaccines. The amendments have caused alarm for certain Singaporeans, including the People's Power Party, the PPP. In a PPP post on Facebook, PPP politician Derek Sim lambasted the stringent amendments. Section 47, 65, and 67 of the Infectious Disease Act were amended and in effect since 2023. If you choose not to go for vaccination during the next pandemic, you will be deemed to commit an offense and you will be criminalized. And we've done videos. They're running simulations for the next pandemic. This one's going to be brutal. Let's keep going. Now, I want to show y'all when this goes global, there's not going to be much resistance to it. This is from 2022, from the National Post, 2022, 3 years ago. More than 1 in 4 Canadians support jail time for the unvaccinated, polls find. 27% of respondents in Canada say it would be okay to jail the unvaccinated for up to 5 days. What's going to happen when a global time frame goes out? How long globally people who have refused their vaccine are going to be jailed? This is from 6 months ago, November 12th, 2024, 6 months ago. Anti-vaxxer gets 5 years for encouraging terrorism during the pandemic. Now, while this is going on in Singapore, and they're making it illegal not to be vaccinated and threatening their citizens with jail time, Trump is on this side of the pond reopening Alcatraz. And he just met with Bill Gates a few months ago. And Bill Gates said that he was impressed with this 3-hour meeting. So Bill Gates goes to Singapore, has a meeting with their president, and 2 days later, they make an announcement that they're going to put in jail people that don't want to be mandated to be vaccinated. And on this side now, here's Trump ordering the reopening of the notorious Alcatraz. Y'all, what is about to happen? And then I did a video the other day called What Constitution? Where Trump says he don't know if he's going to enforce due process, upholding the Constitution, that every person on American soil would have their right to a day in court. What is due process? Due process, a fundamental right guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, ensures fairness and protects against arbitrary government actions. Y'all go see that video I did. What Constitution? Where Trump says over and over again he doesn't know if he's going to uphold the Constitution. Due process gives you a right to trial and legal representation and a chance to defend yourself and court of appeals. Due process is a fundamental right guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, ensures fairness, and protects against arbitrary government action. It mandates that the government follow fair procedures before depriving someone of life, liberty, or property. This includes providing notice, an opportunity to be heard, and a decision by a neutral decision maker. Due process in the court proceedings ensures fairness and that all legal rules and principles are followed. It protects individuals from government overreach, mandates, and here's Trump wanting to open prisons. And a couple of days ago saying he doesn't know if he's going to uphold the due process. And due process protects citizens from their government's overreach and guarantees a fair trial with opportunities to be heard and defend their rights. That means just get thrown into the gulag and not have no way to defend yourself. This includes rights like being informed of legal actions, having an opportunity to present evidence, and a neutral decision maker. Could they just round people up? You post something anti-vax and you're going to get a knock on the door or a battering ram coming through your front door? This is New York Times. Y'all please go see that long video I did. Trump doesn't know if he's going to uphold the Constitution and give people a right to due process. He says it's for the illegals. But we have a Constitution. Let's keep going. And it protects us from the overreach of the government. Now, y'all remember this a couple of weeks ago? Pam Bondi death penalty for domestic terrorist. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, y'all, she's got a spirit that is not right, has called for the death penalty in the cases of domestic terrorism, including in the case of, I don't know how to say that guy's name, murder of Brian Thompson. She has also labeled recent violent attacks on Tesla property as domestic terrorism and vowed to pursue severe charges against those involved. So Trump has judges, states, all filing lawsuits against him. Attorney General Pam Bondi on Fox News Sunday said, "We've had over 170 lawsuits filed against us. That should be a constitutional crisis right there. They do not want to be challenged on anything that Trump is doing." And Mike Johnson said that they might need to dismantle the federal courts. And I did a whole video on that about how of a bad idea that would be, because you would lose your rights. And they will start going after, quote, domestic terrorists. Well, let's look at some of the groups that are domestic terrorists. This is from Texas Homeschool. Parent activists, this is 2021, during the virus, the first time. Parent activists are domestic terrorists. They're starting to label groups. Pro-life organizations are labeled terrorist groups by the U.S. Army. Pro-life organizations labeled terrorist groups by the U.S. Army. Recently, the U.S. Army faced significant backlash for presentation that labeled prominent pro-life organizations as terrorist group. And y'all, what do they do with domestic terrorists? And what if there's no rule of law and all you did was be a parental activist through your homeschool group, or stand up for unborn babies, and you're being labeled a domestic terrorist, and you could lose your due processes because your president says he doesn't think he's going to defend it. How about just being a Christian? The identity Christian movement, ideology of domestic terrorism. Are y'all ready? If you're anti-government or anti-big government, you could be being labeled a domestic terrorist. Do y'all remember this? Trump says anti-Tesla protesters will face hell. People protesting against Tesla should be labeled domestic terrorists, President Donald Trump said on Tuesday at a White House media event designed to bolster Elon Musk's electric car company. Trump sat in the driver's seat of a brand new red Tesla that he said he planned to buy with Musk in the passenger seat, but did not test drive it. Trump said they will be harming a great American company, and anyone using violence against the electric car maker would go through hell. And Attorney General Pam Bondi announces, this is March 20th, 2025, Attorney General Pam Bondi announces severe charges against violent Tesla arsonists. In the days of committing crimes without consequences have ended, Attorney General Pam Bondi said. Let this be a warning. If you join this wave of domestic terrorism against Tesla properties, the Department of Justice will put you behind bars. Domestic terrorism.
Rights to do that. Jennifer.
Very quickly on Tesla, there's a website that's trying to dox Tesla owners across the country and saying they're only going to take down personal information when people show that they've sold their cars. What's the administration going to do about that?
I haven't seen that website, but we certainly think it's despicable, the violence that has taken place against Tesla, the company, its employees, and also just Americans who have chosen to drive an electric vehicle. Many of them are Democrats, by the way. Democrats were big supporters of Tesla and of electric vehicles until Elon Musk decided to vote for Donald Trump. So we would like Democrats to also come out and condemn this heinous violence that we have seen, and I believe the Attorney General has said she's investigating these incidents as acts of domestic terrorism.
Now, remember Trump said anti-Tesla protesters will face hell? Remember first day in office? Trump signed an executive order bringing back the death penalty. The executive order directs the Attorney General to pursue the death penalty for capital crimes and encourages state attorney generals and district attorneys to pursue capital punishment when applicable. When applicable. The Attorney General is also instructed to pursue federal jurisdiction and seek the death penalty regardless of other factors for every federal criminal capital crime, including the murder of a law enforcement officer. Now, we would agree with that, right? Trump's executive order to bring back the death penalty and apply it where applicable. That's a pretty subjective wording. So Trump said that he promised people that are vandalizing Teslas that they would go through hell. The man that says he will take away due process, the man who's bringing back the death penalty, says that Tesla protesters will go through hell. And look at this from March 20th from Daily Beast. Fox News host says Trump could use the death penalty against Tesla vandals. March 25th, FBI launches task force to crack down on attacks against Tesla. Kash Patel calls it domestic terrorism. So the head of FBI calls it domestic terrorism. The attorney general calls it domestic terrorism. Lauren Boebert calls it domestic terrorism. And being pro-life is domestic terrorism. Being a Christian can be domestic terrorism. Being anti-vaxxer can be domestic terrorism. Being a homeschool parent can be domestic terrorism. And they're bringing back the death penalty. And Trump is talking no due process for you to even get a fair trial in the court systems. And talking about dismantling the courts and eliminating federal judges. This is going to get wild. This is from 2021. Anti-vaccine extremism is akin to domestic terrorism. So the U.S. is saying the anti-vaccine mindset is related to domestic terrorism. And from today, y'all remember, Singapore citizens face jail for refusing vaccines after government changes law to criminalize anti-vaxxers. And then in America, from 2021, they're saying an anti-vaccine mindset is just being a domestic terrorist. And now, since then, Trump is asking for Alcatraz to be reopened. The danger of anti-vaccination movement social media influence. You say something you shouldn't say, your ability to use the internet is going away. Y'all, and they have conditioned the masses, like your neighbors, your brothers, your sisters, your family members, they have conditioned them to accept that if you disagree with the mandates of the government, that you are a domestic terrorist and that you deserve to be picked up. You won't have no sympathy. Nearly half of all Democrats say fines and prison times are appropriate for questioning vaccine, polls find. This is 2022. The mindset is here for them to do what Singapore is doing. The mindset is here for Canada to do what Singapore is doing. They have conditioned the people to accept it. March 6, 2021, the Desert Sun. Voice, we should criminally charge COVID vaccine deniers. So y'all, they're talking about it. April 2019, 1 month after the mess began. Oh no, this was the year before. Anti-vaxxers, the year before the virus hit. Anti-vaxxers are dangerous. Make them face isolation. They're gaslighting people. It says these anti-vaxxer parents, call them free riders or even pro-plague, are putting my children in communities at risk to cater to their erroneous belief that vaccinations would harm their children. They're demonizing anti-vaxxers, so people will be clapping when they get rounded up. November 9th, 2021, Pfizer CEO says people who spread misinformation on COVID vaccine are criminals. How close are we to Singapore? Another article the year before the pandemic broke out. They're laying the groundwork. Do parents who choose not to vaccinate their children open themselves up to liability? And y'all, this is from February 8, 2025. They are still debating this. Should anti-vaxxer parents be charged with child abuse? Now, let's get into this. Are universal vaccines a sustainable development goal of the United Nations? Yes. Achieving universal access to safe, effective, quality, and affordable essential medicines and vaccines, including universal vaccines, is a key target within the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, good health and well-being. So Bill Gates, who funds the UN, who funds the World Health Organization, just went to Singapore to open an office there, meets with their president, 2 days later, their president announced, "Hey, we're gonna advance the sustainable development goals for universal vaccines. And if our people don't go along with it, we're gonna throw them in jail." Y'all, it's gonna come to our door. This is from yesterday, Wednesday, May 7th. Alcatraz is just one of many facilities that the Trump administration is reactivating, mostly to detain illegals. Who are the remainders of the mostly illegals? Now remember, Trump says, "I don't know," when he is asked about due process and upholding the Constitution. President Trump repeatedly said he did not know when asked in a TV interview whether every person on American soil was entitled to due process as guaranteed by the Fifth Amendment. Now, Trump appointed anti-vaxxer Robert F. Kennedy to be over Health and Human Services. And May 5th, 2 days ago, Trump and RFK Jr. launched a $500 million universal vaccine initiative, commingling the flu vaccine and the COVID vaccine. Fox News senior medical analyst Mark Siegel discusses the Trump administration's initiative to develop a vaccine to target multiple viruses and the Murdoch Children's Research Institute studying potential vaccines for strep. So now Trump and Robert F. Kennedy are pro-vaccine. What's going to happen if you don't want to obey their mandate? And look at this. The term vaccinated economy refers to the economic benefits and the societal impacts stemming from widespread vaccination efforts. The term vaccinated economy, y'all. October 2021, COVID booster shots will be mandatory in the vaccinated economy. So they've been talking about this for a minute. The vaccinated economy. The UN that Bill Gates funds, Bill Gates, Rockefeller Foundation launched the 15-5 agenda to make digital IDs, vaccine passports, and central bank digital currencies mandatory to participate in society by 2030. Vaccines and proof of vaccines, digital IDs and digital currencies to be able to live in their world. Everybody else is going to be criminal. October 6, 2021, I did a video, The Vaccinated Economy. It's one of my better videos. We are now in the vaccinated economy. And now Trump and Robert F. Kennedy are about to release more vaccines on us. HHS and NIH launched Next Generation Universal Vaccine Platform for Pandemic-Prone Viruses, May 1st, 2025. Anti-vaxxer Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is now launching vaccines. HHS and NIH announced development of universal vaccine for COVID-19 and influenza. Researchers aim to develop a universal vaccine platform that could protect against both COVID-19 and influenza without annual updates. October 30th, 2024, frightening to consider. Fears grow over Trump's threats to political foes. And remember, he called himself the father of the vaccine and says he didn't get enough credit over those vaccines. And now him and RFK Jr. are releasing more vaccines. Will you be his political enemy if you don't give him enough credit or obey? This is from April 12th, 2025, a month ago, not even a month ago. Trump's retribution sends a chilling message to dissenters. Donald Trump's White House has a threatening message for anyone who might even be perceived to disagree with the president. Don't or else. Even though he has promised to end what he viewed as the weaponization of the Department of Justice, Trump is treating people who disagree with him more like the enemy from within he talked about during the presidential campaign. The president took the unusual step this week of issuing official proclamations ordering the federal investigations of people who worked in his first administration. Now, so he's going to go after people that worked for him. And then I did the whole video how he betrayed Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas, who's now the governor of Arkansas, who was his White House director, communications director. She became the governor of Arkansas. They just had a lot of damage from tornadoes. She put in money for emergency funds to rebuild their state, and he denied it. So he turned his back on his friends, and now he's investigating people that used to work for him. He's demanding free work from the law firms who represented his perceived enemies, threatening to impeach judges, deporting campus protesters, and so much more. The underlying message for anyone who hasn't put all these things together is that dissent will not be tolerated under Trump 2.0. Trump defends his vow to prosecute his rivals, saying sometimes revenge can be justified. Y'all remember him telling Dr. Phil that? Do y'all remember when Trump said during his campaign, haul out the guillotine? Let's go hear some thoughts from this man about Trump reopening Alcatraz.
So Alcatraz is back in the news. Well, if that's the case, there's a few things we should talk about. Except I'm going to assume that most people have a pretty good understanding of what this place is, so we're just going to get weird right off the bat. See, there's a lot of interesting details about Alcatraz that most people don't even know. It started off as an island where native Indians would go to collect bird eggs and fish and even hold ceremonies. And just like everything else, it was traded and bought. See, the first structure that was on Alcatraz Island was a lighthouse. And then not too long after that, in 1859, the military took it over, fortified it, and made Fort Alcatraz. With the intentions of protecting San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz Island has been built and rebuilt by the U.S. military for over 80 years. Until 1933, when they turned it into strictly a federal prison, which is what we see today, Alcatraz, aka The Rock. But what a lot of people don't understand is there's a lot of layers to this island. Like, it has everything that we know it for above ground, all the cell blocks and everything, but this thing has a whole underground. It's even got multiple dungeons. And this is where we're gonna get weird, because the best way I can explain this is to follow one man. Organized crime boss, James Whitey Bulger. Now, I'm not gonna go into what this man did in his career, but when he was finally busted, he went to a prison in Atlanta, Georgia. And at that prison, he was subjected to certain experiments. Until 1959, that is, when he was transferred to Alcatraz. Now, not only is it weird that he went from Georgia, did his little experiments, and then went straight to Alcatraz, but while he was there, but one of the friends he made at Alcatraz was this guy named John Anglin. That was one of the two brothers and the uncle that escaped from Alcatraz and were never seen again. All right, now, there's something I want you to understand about San Francisco Bay and just San Francisco as a whole. See, it's kind of been a testing ground. Now, don't forget, late 50s, early 60s is when Whitey Bulger, Machine Gun Kelly, Al Pacino, all these guys were at Alcatraz. Operation Sea Spray. They sprayed a bacteria over San Francisco. It was a simulation to see how fast and how far it would spread. And from what I hear, they're still dealing with that to this day. Then there was Operation Midnight Climax. This is basically just a side quest of the all right, now what they did is they used ladies of the night to lure them in, get them on, and use it for surveillance and control. You see, those same three letters have had a stronghold in San Francisco for a long time. And just in case you're having any doubts that something like this actually happens, back in 2022, the University of California comes out and apologizes for the experiments they were doing on prisoners back in the 50s and 60s in San Francisco. Doing things like putting pesticides on their skin and there's definitely more that's going to come out about this with the hidden dungeons that were found. Even here more recently, where archaeologists x-rayed the ground underneath Alcatraz, in which they found buried structures, vaulted brick masonry tunnels, ventilation ducts, all kinds of stuff. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen with this whole thing, but it'll be interesting to find out. Y'all stay safe.
So I went and looked up that article. After learning of Whitey Bulger's LSD test, juror has regrets. One of the jurors who convicted notorious crime boss James Whitey Bulger says she regrets her decision after learning that he was an unwitting participant in a covert CIA experiment with LSD. Bulger terrorized Boston from the 1970s into the 1990s with a campaign of murder, extortion, and drug trafficking, and then spent 16 years on the lam after he was tipped to his pending arrest. Y'all go see that movie with Julia Roberts and Mel Gibson. In that movie, Mel Gibson was underneath MK Ultra mind control. In 2013, Janet Ullor was one of the 12 jurors who found Bulger guilty in a massive racketeering case, including involvement in 11 murders, even after hearing evidence from the mobster was helped by corrupt agents in the Boston office of the FBI. But now she says she regrets voting to convict Bulger on any of the murder charges. Her regret stems from a cache of more than 70 letters Bulger wrote to her from prison. In some, he describes his unwitting participation in a CIA experiment with LSD. In a desperate search for mind-controlled drugs in the late 1950s, the CIA doused Bulger with the powerful hallucinogen more than 50 times when he was serving his first stretch in prison, something his lawyers never brought up in his federal trial. She has spoken publicly about her regret before, but says her belief that the gangster was wrongly convicted on the murder charges was reinforced after reading a new book by Brown University professor Stephen Kinzer. Poisoner in Chief, Sidney Gottlieb, and the CIA Search for Mind Control. The book digs into the dark tale of the CIA's former chief chemist and his attempts to develop mind control techniques by giving LSD and other drugs to unsuspecting individuals, including colleagues, and observing the effects. It was encouraging to know that I wasn't losing my mind and thinking this was important. It told me this is huge. I mean, how many lives were affected by this? We have no idea. And Trump is wanting to reopen Alcatraz. What is about to happen?
Pretty much know what's above ground at Alcatraz Island.
But now a new study finds there are hidden buildings and tunnels underneath the prison yard. Historians long suspected that when Alcatraz prison was built in the early 20th century, it was constructed over a Civil War era military fortification. But instead of digging and disturbing the land to confirm this theory, archaeologists used radars and laser scans along with historical maps and pictures. They found fully buried structures, underground ammunition magazines, and tunnels. Archaeologists are now planning more studies.
What are they going to use these tunnels for? Archaeologists find hidden tunnels below Alcatraz. The CIA's secret quest for mind control, torture, LSD, and a poisoner in chief. Now, y'all, this is in prison, okay? And they're wanting to arrest people who don't want to take the vaccine. What kind of experiments are going to be done on them? Now there's a much darker side to this program because a lot of people who were being experimented on, they were prisoners. I mean, they had no idea what they were being given. One of these prisoners was the famous gangster Whitey Berger, who was serving time for hijacking a truck, and he was in the Atlanta penitentiary. So he actually wrote something describing his experience. Can you give us a summary of what he said? Whitey Berger was one of the prisoners who volunteered for what he was told was an experiment aimed at finding a cure for schizophrenia. As part of this experiment, he was given LSD every day for more than a year. He realized that this had nothing to do with schizophrenia and that he was a guinea pig in a government experiment aimed at seeing what people's long-term reactions to LSD was. Essentially, could we make a person lose his mind by feeding him LSD every day over and over such a long period? Y'all know this part is sad. A person that did not know he was part of the government experiment. And listen to this. Berger wrote afterward about his experiences. Y'all, this could happen to anybody. Anybody could get snatched up and become a person in their experiment. Berger wrote afterward about his experience, which he described as quite horrific. He thought he was going insane. He wrote, I was in prison for committing a crime, but they committed a greater crime on me. Towards the end of his life, Berger came to realize the truth of what had happened to him, and he actually told his friends that he was going to find a doctor in Atlanta who was the head of that experiment program in the penitentiary and go. Now that doctor later died a natural death, so Berger didn't go get to carry that out. But he was one of the many prisoners across America who unwittingly were fed huge amounts of LSD, and the reason for this was very simple. The poisoner of death wanted to create a way to seize control of people's mind, and he realized it was a two-part process. First, you had to blast away their existing mind. Second, you had to find a way to insert a new mind into that resulting void. Now, this might seem unrelated. This doctor is going to talk about being brain dead is not a such thing. Being brain dead is not a such thing, and it's going to tie into prisons. Listen to this.
Invented brain death mainly to get organs, but then also so they don't waste money on treating people who aren't ever going to get a job. And so what they did is they set up a committee at Harvard, and the committee invented brain death. The committee did not do studies on dogs or cats or rats. They didn't collect data on human beings. They just invented brain death. And they had no patient data. They had no basic science study. And what they did is they cut the beating heart out of a 3-day-old baby and transplanted it into an 18-day-old baby. And at the end of their surgeries, a short time after the end of their surgeries, both of those babies were dead. It was illegal. It was immoral. And so they had to do something to make it legal. And a lot of people think that brain death means flat brainwaves. They're not even required to do brainwave testing. They now get more organs from overdose of drugs than they do from accidents and gunshot wounds combined. There are 8 deaths a day from overdose in Ohio.
And y'all, this was wild. When brain dead people lie on the operating table to undergo surgery, in 75% of the cases, it happens that they make spontaneous defensive reactions. They're not dead, and they're undergoing surgery to have organs cut out. Some slap their arms in front of their chest in a protective gesture. Others among them even stand up a little. Can you imagine a person laying on an operating table who they've been declared brain dead, but they're not really dead, and they're sensing everything that's going on. They're feeling getting cut on, and they stand up? When brain dead people lie on the operating table to undergo surgery, in 75% of the cases, it happens that they make spontaneous defensive reactions with their arms and legs. Some slap their arms in front of their chest in a protective gesture. Others among them even stand up a little. It also happens that they sit down completely upright, grab their carrier tightly, or even wrap them around and make gurgling noises. Blood pressure and heart rate also goes up. According to the surgical assistants who are present, it's scary every time. You never get used to it. There are even examples of surgical assistants who are so terrified that they have given up their profession. The defensive movements of donors who are about to be operated on are called Lazarus reflex. Also, the Lazarus reflexes are a sign that the brain dead is not dead. Which dead person is able to stand up and surround the operating assistant? Doctors say about these gestures and movements that these are involuntary muscle reflexes, spinal reflexes triggered by the spinal cord. They suggest that this answers all the questions you can ask about this phenomenon. But that's not the case, though. This justification alone should give us to think, because such involuntary muscle reflexes are probably only possible in someone who is alive and not in someone who is dead. Have you ever seen a dead person who suddenly sat up? A young anesthesiast was present for the first time in a surgery where organs were extracted. At the beginning of the operation, his boss, an anesthesiologist, gave him the instructions to begin administering the anesthesia. The young anesthetist reacted surprised. That's not necessary. He's dead after all. Are you going to administer anesthesia to someone who is dead? Her face turned to almost vicious face, and she threw a single sentence at him. How do you know for sure? Then the young anesthetist was stunned. In this context, Ger Ludwig asked the only understandable question: should we possibly consider that the Lazarus reflexes as the last effort of a person who is aware of what will happen to him? The administration of anesthesia when organs are extracted is thought differently. In the guidelines of the German Foundation for Organ Transplantation, the foundation that requires organ donation in Germany, it states that anesthesia is not necessary to exclude the consciousness of the organ donor and to avoid pain reactions. However, in view of the Lazarus reflex, it is still reasonable to claim that the organ donor, with appropriate means or reflex, you ask yourself, how can you reflex and put a dead person to rest? It's a pretty long article. I'll leave the rest to you. It says, I'll just look at this part. Which dead person needs anesthesia? Which death can cause blood pressure to rise? Which dead is doing the defensive response? So it is not right to claim that a person is dead if their brain doesn't work. That person still has a higher consciousness. Consequently, we cannot claim that a person is dead if the brain stops working. Therefore, more and more people are convinced that the moment when brain death is determined is not the moment of death, but a moment of stage of the dying process. Most doctors agree that the moment the brain death is determined, the process of dying has become irreversible. But brain dead is not dead. Brain death marks a specific moment in the dying process. Consequently, we can say that the brain dead man is still alive. If the kidneys don't work, let's not say that the person in question is kidney dead, but join him to dialysis. When the brain doesn't work anymore, it's sick, just like the kidneys, but not dead. Therefore, it is also possible for the person who are described as brain dead to wake up again and come to their senses. There are more and more doctors who admit the possibility that a brain dead can still feel something, feel pain, and possibly even hear what is being said. Now, y'all, where do they get organs? China organ harvest. Forced organ harvesting in China. Forced organ harvesting of China prisoners. Killing prisoners for transplants. Harvesting organs from recently executed prisoners. And y'all, I did a whole video that they take out their organs without anesthesia. Oh, but you say that's just China. China. Look at this from January 10th, 2024. Families in disbelief after hundreds of bodies found buried outside a jail in Jackson, Mississippi. In Alabama, January 17, 2024, a week later, prisoners' bodies returned to their families without their heart and other organs. In America, families seek answers after inmates' bodies returned in Alabama missing their organs, including their brain. 215 people buried behind Mississippi jail, and some of the families did not even know they were in jail. The discovery of 215 bodies buried in unmarked graves behind a jail. A community left in disbelief. How many people did they organ harvest there in prison in America? Now, I typed in experiments at Alcatraz. The experiment with prisoners at Alcatraz. Alcatraz Island, U.S. Penitentiary, Alcatraz. Classified as a concentration model, where difficult to manage prisoners from other institutions would be concentrated under one roof, Alcatraz served as an experiment. And now Trump wants to reopen it. And what kind of experiments are about to happen? The ugly past of U.S. human experiments uncovered. Shocking as it may seem, U.S. government doctors once thought it was fine to experiment on disabled people and prison inmates. U.S. officials acknowledged there had been dozens of similar experiments in the United States, studies that often involved making healthy people sick. Attitudes similar to the Nazi experiments. The AP review of past research found, the Associated Press, they found a federally funded study program that began in 1942 that injected experimental flu vaccines in male patients at a state insane asylum. Experimental vaccine. Weren't a large 80% of the world given an experimental vaccine in 2020? For a study in 1957 when the Asian flu pandemic was spreading. Y'all, this was all an experiment. Federal researchers sprayed the virus in the noses of 23 inmates in Jessup, Maryland, to compare their reactions to those of 32 virus-exposed inmates who had been given a new vaccine. Victims for science. Prisoners have long been victimized for the sake of science. The late 1940s and 50s saw a huge growth in the U.S. pharmaceutical and healthcare industries, accompanied by a boom in prisoner experiments founded by both the government and corporations. Y'all, let me show y'all the source of this, okay? This is NBC News. This isn't somebody conspiracy theory website, okay? Now, y'all, this is NBC News. By the early 1970s, even experiments involving prisoners were considered scandalous. In a widely covered congressional hearings in 1973, pharmaceutical industry officials acknowledged they were using prisoners for testing because they were cheaper than chimpanzees. Now, throw this in here. The CIA has a Hollywood budget. While the CIA doesn't have a dedicated Hollywood budget in the traditional sense, it does have resources and influence within the entertainment industry. The CIA has historically collaborated with Hollywood, providing guidance, script reviews, and even funding for certain projects. They collaborated on the Top Gun movies. How the CIA infiltrated Hollywood. The CIA already had similar departments in operation. Since 1947, they have assisted and funded the production of 60 films and television shows. How the CIA shapes films. That's propaganda. Media education. Theaters of war, how the Pentagon and CIA took Hollywood. The Pentagon's influence on Hollywood goes far beyond the obvious propaganda films like Top Gun. 2022, from the Washington Post, Top Gun brought to you by the U.S. military. Now, I showed that to show that there was a movie made in Hollywood called Experiment Alcatraz in the 1950s. I think they make these movies for their own sick entertainment so they can all go to the movies and watch what they're doing to people. Experiment Alcatraz is a 1950 American crime film directed by Edward Kahn, written by Orville Hampton. The plot: many Alcatraz prisoners have volunteered to take an experimental serum that could cure a fatal blood disease, promise parole if they take part. During the experiments, notorious racketeer Barry Morgan, that would be Whitey Bulger, a racketeer, steals one of the Lieutenant Nurse John McKinnon's scissors and stabs a convict and escapes. The medical tests are abandoned and the vaccine is called a failure. So, considering the propaganda, the labeling, if you don't want to take their experimental drugs, you could be imprisoned. The people that were brainwashed by this, the people that took it, that now have regrets, but now a second wave is coming. But listen to this ex-CIA agent on Christianity saying Christians cannot be controlled. And that's why they will have to round them up.
Christians. Remember, the Soviet Union made a statement that we could control all of our entire population except the Christians. And they had to put them in prison and in gulags. And I remember in 1994 when I was in the CIA, we were ordered into a conference room. We all filed in. There's about 30 of us. And our division chief starts off by saying, now don't get mad at me. I'm just the messenger. This comes down from the director of the CIA. You can no longer say Merry Christmas in any CIA office space. You cannot have a manger scene on your desk or on your door, or you will face administrative penalties. And the sad part was only 2 of us, our jaws dropped. Like, what? And the CIA was actively against Christians, and they used DEI as a method to suppress them. And I remember it was Christmas Eve, and I walked out. I thought about this, prayed about this overnight, and I said, oh, no, you don't. So I walked out on New Year's Eve, and I turned around to everybody, and I said, good night, and by the way, Merry Christmas. I'm like, there is a line you don't cross. Well, there was an outrage from the CIA populace, and as as evil people always do. When they got resistance, they backed off and said, well, never mind, you know. But it has been Christianity, because the Christians are the only ones that will not answer to tyranny. We believe in God and a higher power, and we will not be manipulated by a tyrannical regime. And that's why Christians are despised around the world, including in this previous administration. My goodness. And going back to Obama, how they attacked Christians and eliminated the religious freedom post at the Department of State, and on and on and on it went. But that's the reason. Why?
So Bill Gates is funding the vaccines. He's influenced politicians. He's pushing mandates. And this is from 2019, the year before the whole thing started. Bill Gates Foundation invests in private prisons again. So he'll have a whole slew of people to experiment on, won't he? With the threats, if you don't take it in the free world, we're going to throw you in prison. And then if you're in prison, you can get it in prison. Now listen to this. This is important. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation just upped its investment in Serco. Write down Serco, a UK private prison group, adding nearly 200,000 shares. Serco runs a half dozen private for-profit prisons in the UK, which holds a bigger proportion of inmates in for-profit prisons than any other country except for Australia. Serco also has a 10-year contract with the government to provide services for asylum seekers. So let's learn about Serco.
This is the Serco Group. They run all 7 immigration detention centres in Australia, but they do lots more. In fact, they're probably the biggest company you've never heard of. Governments all around the world outsource to Serco. They run half of London's traffic lights, all of Dublin's, and in Ontario, Canada, they test you for your driver's licence. Serco are also the largest air traffic controllers in the world. They've got 54 towers in the US, and they control Baghdad's air traffic. They even maintain the RAF squadron the Queen flies on. All over the planet, Serco are moving people, from metros in Dubai to buses in Adelaide. And they're good at stopping people from moving too. Serco will soon be the largest operator of private prisons in the UK, and they're very efficient at it. In one prison, they increase capacity by 20% simply by putting beds in the toilets. In another Serco prison, a 14-year-old hanged himself after being assaulted by Serco guards, the UK's youngest ever death in custody. But don't think Serco aren't good with kids. In Bradford, they run all the state schools in the district. Serco is the model of a modern multinational, and that's why they're the right company to keep us safe. They've been running the UK's ballistic missile defence system ever since it was outsourced 40 years ago. In fact, they look after Britain's entire nuclear arsenal, from creation to decommissioning. But wait, there's more. Serco are so good at running things, they even run time itself. That's right, Serco have the contract for setting Greenwich Mean Time. And Serco just keep getting bigger. Since 1994, they've grown by 1,200%. How have they been so successful? CEO Chris Hyman puts his success with Serco down to listening to God. Now, you might think things like nuclear arsenals and border protection are best handled by the government, but that's not a problem for Serco because about 85% of their workforce are ex-public servants, so they have all the training and connections necessary to handle big government contracts. In Australia, Serco have a presence on every military base, run every immigration detention centre, 2 prisons, cross-country trains like the Indian Pacific and the GAN, and they're bidding on more contracts right now, including one to run prisons across New South Wales. So, even if you don't know their name, chances are you're caught in their web. Serco, bringing service to life.
Have you guys ever heard of a company called Serco? Well, it might be the biggest company that you have never heard of. Everyone knows about the private prison industry, the transportation industry, and government agencies. But what if I told you that there was just one company that oversaw almost every facet of all of these sectors? Yep, that's Serco, the mother of all multinational corporations. Serco is a $1.5 billion services company based in Hook, North Hampshire in the United Kingdom. whose motto is bringing services to life. So, what the hell does that actually mean? Well, according to their website, Serco improves the quality and efficiency of essential services that matter to millions of people around the world. The work we do for national and local governments involves us with the most important areas of public service, including health, education, transport, science, and defense. Now, I know it still sounds very vague about what they actually do, but more importantly is how many industries Serco actually oversees across the entire planet. Since governments from around the world outsource to Serco, the massive corporation has its tentacles in 16 countries worldwide. They cash in on detention. Serco runs 7 immigration centers and has a presence on every military base in Australia. They're also the largest operator of private prisons in the UK. Serco also directs airplanes. They are the largest air traffic controllers in the world with 54 towers in the US alone. The company also supplies air traffic control in Iraq and the United Arab Emirates. Serco also moves people on the ground, from Scotland ferries to Dubai metros. But the company not only manages public transport everywhere, but also operates speed track cameras and creates the software for monitoring traffic across London. But don't worry, Serco's looking out for the kids, guys. They currently have contracts to run every state school in Bradford, England. But they haven't forgotten about Grandma and Grandpa. They're privatizing community centers too. If you haven't figured it out yet, Serco is essentially the Swiss Army knife of corporations. Serco plays doctor too. Private hospitals are a big industry under the umbrella company. And Serco has started to acquire hospitals in Australia and England. Serco is so unbelievably powerful that they even control time. Yep, Serco has friends in such high places, they have been contracted to set Greenwich Mean Time, or GMT. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Do you think that things like running border patrol and protecting nuclear arsenals should be run by a government body or a private multinational? Well, I'm sure you can guess what I'm getting at next. Serco does both. Not only do they look over the country's entire nuclear arsenal, they also run the UK's ballistic missile defense system. In fact, their primary purpose of being stationed here in the United States is to supply defense and intelligence services across the nation. Check out their promo video for the US government.
For the Department of Homeland Security, we manage over 62 million active records, helping to keep our nation secure.
Think of it as an integrated system that helps the right person make the right decision at the right time. For the intelligence community, we provide planning, training, program support, and project execution. And the rest, it's classified.
The rest is classified? Guys, we already think you're shady. Is it really necessary to tell us that you have even more secrets? But thanks for the disclaimer. So what branches of the government does Serco specifically provide services to? Well, the U.S. Army, U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, the Ministry of Ontario, U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Marine Corps, Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, U.S. Department of State, the intelligence community. Whew, let me catch my breath. I just wanted to establish the extent of their reach. But wait, there's more. Serco's so passionately committed to the U.S. that they're also working with the government to fight cyber terrorism, and they remain passionately committed to the American government's mission. Check it out.
I like to say, we don't have to look hard to find the best and brightest. They find us.
We are passionate about the future of our nation, and we embrace our government's mission as our mission.
We are.
We are.
We are.
We are.
We are.
Your mission, our passion.
We are the company that runs the world. But don't worry, they're passionate about swallowing up the world industry by industry, government by government. Since 1994, they've grown by over 1,200%, and they continue to acquire more contracts and services every day. So how does it happen that a multinational corporation can run things such as the time and the safeguarding of nuclear weapons? Well, about 85% of Serco's employees are also ex-public servants, so they have the know-how and networking to keep that revolving door going. So why don't we know more about Serco? Well, that's just the problem, is that this corporation has way too much power and way too much control. There's no doubt that we live in a corporatocracy. The corporate coup d'etat has already taken over. The question is, how are we going to fight it?
So Bill Gates funds the World Health Organization and the UN to push their sustainable developmental goals. He funds Pfizer and all the vaccine pharmaceutical companies. He's influencing governments that are now putting their people in jail. And in the United States, they ran illegal covert vaccination programs on prisoners. Trump is talking about opening more prisons to put people in. And Bill Gates is invested in prisons. Wow, can this get any more crazy? From May 5th, 2025, Serco strengthened government relations with appointment of Kim Jong-un as vice president. And y'all, Serco works with DHS, and it's classified what they do for them. And they're on military bases. Will they be rounding people up? Serco, a provider of professional technology, engineering, and management services, announced today that the company has promoted Kim Joyner to the role of vice president. This was 2 days ago. In her role, Kim will help the company execute its elected official outreach strategies, see around the corner on defense policy and regulatory changes. She says, I am eager to take up the mantle of advancing Serco's mission on the Hill. So Serco influences Washington, D.C. and build on the foundation of our high-level relationships with our federal partners. And they're funded by Bill Gates. And they have influence over Washington. And they run prisons. Does Serco contract for U.S. prisons? Yes, Serco does contract with U.S. prisons and other justice system entities. They provide services like prison management, escort services, and reintegration programs for offenders, as well as facilities management in correctional facilities. Are y'all ready? And they are funded by Bill Gates, who wants to mandate his vaccines on everybody. And Singapore is throwing people in jail who don't take the vaccines. And Serco works with the United States prison systems. Is Serco in Singapore, where they're throwing people in jail? Yes, Serco operates in Singapore. Is Serco in China, where they organ harvest? Yes, Serco does have a presence in China. Serco Asia Pacific has been operating in China for 30 years. 7 months ago, Serco must be punished for oppressive treatment of prisoners. Serco, that's funded by Bill Gates, is abusive to prisoners. Serco must be punished for oppressive treatment of prisoners at Australia's largest jail, legal experts say. November 5th, 2024, revealed the British companies quietly backing Trump. Now, who do you think one of these companies are? Who do you think? Let's go look. Serco. AstraZeneca is backing Trump. Serco. Huh. So, the borrower is servant to the lender. When you're taking money from people, you have to do their bidding. Does Serco work for King Charles? Yes, Serco does work for King Charles. Serco provides services to the government, including those related to the royal family. They have a history of working with the UK government on various projects, including some related to the royal family's operations. For example, Serco employees were involved in the preparations and celebrations for a king's coronation. And y'all, guess what? King Charles is against anti-vaxxers. And King Charles has a relationship with Serco. And Bill Gates has a relationship with Serco. And they're all pushing the vaccines. And Serco runs prisons. And Serco has influence over the United States and Trump in Washington, D.C. And they assist with the prisons in America. And they're all having conversations. Should anti-vaxxers be arrested and put in prison? And Singapore is now doing this. And now, a couple of days ago, we've got Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. launching a $500 million universal vaccine initiative for COVID and the flu. And what's going to happen to the father of the vaccine, Donald Trump, who says he didn't get enough credit with the COVID vaccine, who's going to want credit for this vaccine that they're now pushing? What are they going to do with the people that don't want to do it? And he's got the full backing by the Attorney General to round people up and throw them in prisons without due process, where they do illegal experiments on people and force vaccinations. February 18th, 2025, a couple of months ago, Serco goes all in on U.S. defense, but will it pay off? The outsourcing giant will need to stay on the right side of Elon Musk's efficiency drive. Serco is making a bold push into the U.S. defense, snapping up Northrop Grumman's missions training and satellite ground network systems. Herndon contractor to acquire non-government division for $327 million. Serco announces purchase of mission training and satellite communication software business. A satellite company. Serco just bought a satellite company. Do you think that's important? Serco buying a satellite company? Serco that works with the Department of Defense? Using satellite imagery to improve vaccination coverage. Y'all, this was wild. Researchers analyzed satellite images of nighttime lights to help estimate coverage for measles vaccination campaign in Africa. The approach can help disease surveillance and planning immunization campaigns that account for seasonal shifts in population. The company that runs prisons now bought a satellite company that can track vaccination coverage. Y'all, this is a sci-fi movie. Millions of people worldwide die each year from infectious diseases such as measles. This disease is very contagious and can easily spread when an infected person coughs or sneezes. Measles can be prevented with vaccine and has almost completely eliminated in the U.S. due to widespread use of the vaccine. Now, let's get to this part. I want to find this. To better understand and quantify the fluctuations in population size and distribution during this time of vaccines, the researchers analyzed visible and thermal infrared images obtained from satellites. The images had a spatial resolution of about 1 kilometer, allowing analysis of brightness within the cities. The team, so there's something in the vaccines that shines. The team screened images that were taken between 7 and 10 p.m. that weren't affected by bright moon phases or clouds. These images thus captured nighttime lights from electric lighting and fires. Modeling the satellite images showed that the city total population size was larger than estimated. The team determined that 11,000 more children in the target vaccination age had been present in the city at the time of the outbreak that had been estimated. The immunization campaign had occurred during the dry season when the population had increased with seasonal migrants. I just typed in, can Luciferase be used with orbiting satellites for tracking? While Luciferase and bioluminescence imaging are powerful tools for tracking biological processes, they are not typically used in conjunction with orbiting satellites for tracking. Y'all, they're going to start calling anti-vaxxers domestic terrorists so that they can round them up. There won't be any resistance. People will applaud it happening. This was 2021. Murder plot and threats from anti-vaxxers pose a challenge for Germany's new chancellor. So they're gaslighting and making anti-vaxxers look like bad people. This was in America in 2021. Anti-vaccine extremism is akin to domestic terrorism. This is fulfilling the Bible, Matthew 24. Then they shall deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Now, I want y'all to hear how power hungry Pam Bondi is and how she brags on Elon. Attorney General Pam Bondi, the death penalty. They will hand you over and kill you for God's namesake. Let's hear this.
Pam is doing such a fantastic job. I thought maybe you could say a few words.
Thank you, President. As far as we are hearing a lot about fraud, waste, and abuse, a lot of waste and abuse, but there is a tremendous amount of fraud. And Elon, thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your team. You have uncovered so much fraud in our government, and we will prosecute you. We have an internal task force now working with every agency sitting here at this table. And if you've committed fraud, we're coming after you. Thank you, Elon, for that. On the violent crime level, thanks to President Trump's directive, we are seeking the death penalty again. So all of these horrible, violent criminals that you're hearing about around the country, they will face the death penalty federally within our country. And the drug dealers need to get out of here because we are coming after you. We're going to have 94 great U.S. attorneys around this country, and everyone will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Without due process.
Thank you, President. It's at your directive.
I couldn't have said that better. That's very good.
And go see that video where Trump said, what was the name of it? What Constitution? Where he said he doesn't know if he can defend the Constitution. And his lawyer said he did not take an oath to defend the Constitution. And now he's saying he doesn't know if people deserve due process. And they're going after violent domestic terrorists. And look at the group of people who have been deemed domestic terrorists, who will be denied due process. Revelation 2:10 says, fear none of these things that you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. This is the word of Jesus. This is Jesus. Fear none of these things which thou art about to suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee the crown of life. They've been plotting this. It was 2021, the year after the COVID lockdown started. Austrian chancellor considering implementing lockdown for the unvaccinated. And you remember it passed in New York that they could do it. So they're all on the same page what they want to do with the unvaccinated. We must literally starve the unvaccinated into submission. How demonic is that? Now, y'all, if Bill Gates said you're going to have vaccine passports, digital ID, digital currency to be able to participate in the new society. Well, if you've got digital ID and you're not complying with your vaccine, they can literally starve you to death if you're unvaccinated until you go do whatever experiments they want you to do. And I don't know why, but I started remembering about the Simon and Simon, the TV show from the 80s. My sister loved that show. The two brothers that were detectives, AJ and Rick. This episode, Reunion in Alcatraz. AJ and Rick head to San Francisco to help a friend who's opening a detective agency. And I think it was Rick that ended up in Alcatraz and in one of the cells. It was a very good episode. Okay. And they condition through movies. And here it's starting. Singapore citizens face jail for refusing vaccines after government changes laws. Changes the laws. Trump changing the law, saying we don't deserve due process. Singapore citizens face jail for refusing vaccines after government changes laws just to criminalize anti-vaxxers, politically motivated to throw their political opponents into prison. But y'all, the Bible says, know ye not that your body belongs to the Holy Ghost? Glorify God, therefore, in your body. It says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and render unto God what is God's. Know ye not that you have been bought with a price? Jesus Christ bought our bodies. The government does not have a right to our body. 2 Timothy 3:12 says, all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. And it's heating up. It's heating up. This is from October 21st, 26, 2021. Canadian bishop makes COVID jab mandatory for Catholics to attend Mass. So you weren't even getting into the Catholic Mass if you didn't have your vaccine. What's this? John 16:2? More Bible coming alive? They shall put you out of the synagogues. Yea, the time cometh that whoever killeth you will think that he doeth God a favor or doeth God a service. 2 Timothy 2:3-5. Ye therefore must endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No one entangled in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier. And also, if anyone competes in athletics, he is not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. And Jesus said in Matthew 24:13 that he that endures to the end, the same shall be saved. Endure hardship like a good soldier. Endure to the end, you shall be saved. Overcome, and you're going to be given the crown of life. And one of Trump's first executive orders, restoring the death penalty, protecting public safety. Round 2 is about to be way more rough than round 1 because they've got all the peripheral things in place, all the apparatus, it's all there. They've worked it from all angles. They're changing the laws. They're getting the legal authority to do it. Trump is ruling by executive order, dismantling the Constitution. You will have no legal recourse to defend yourself in court. We are about to see some crazy time. We got Bill Gates funding the World Health Organization, funding the UN, funding Pfizer, his 3-hour meeting with Trump, meeting in Singapore, and then now they agree to throw anti-vaxxers in prison. He's invested in Serco that works with our Department of Homeland Security that has influence over our government. Bill Gates is invested in prisons. And they shall put you out of the synagogue. Yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think they do God a service with their illegal experiments. Our only hope is in God. Our only hope is in God. And you cannot bend or fold. You have to have a backbone, a metal rod of steel running up your spine, because we're going to have to stand hard, and we're going to need our brothers and sisters, because the world is not going to stand with us. We're going to have to stand with the people that love Jesus the same way we do. I love y'all. Keep standing for Jesus. If you appreciate the content that I bring on this channel, would you prayerfully consider a love offering? I am viewer supported only. I have no outside job. I'm not monetized. I don't have Patreon. I don't give paying people more truth than the people that don't pay. And if you appreciate the truth that you get from this channel, would you prayerfully consider supporting the channel? If I'm feeding you spiritually, would you prayerfully consider feeding us physically? I love y'all. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.